The galaxy spun ever onward, its stars untouched by the struggles of those who lived in their light. But for Obi-Wan Kenobi, the center of his universe had been ripped away. Satine Kryze's death at the hands of Maul shattered something deep within him. For years, the Jedi Order had been his home, his purpose, his guiding star. Yet now, standing on the precipice of his grief, Obi-Wan began to wonder if that foundation was as firm as he had believed. Her death had not merely been a blow to his heart, it had laid bare the cracks in the Jedi Order's philosophy. The stoic detachment, the suppression of love, and the relentless expectation of sacrifice all seemed empty and cruel in the face of Satine's loss. As Obi-Wan looked back at the years he had spent serving the Order, he found himself questioning whether he had truly served the greater good, or simply been a cog in a machine too rigid to adapt to the needs of those it claimed to protect. The decision to leave was not made lightly. Obi-Wan had dedicated his life to the Jedi and their teachings, and abandoning them felt akin to severing a part of himself. But the growing disillusionment with their inflexible dogma, combined with the aching void left by Satine, made it clear he could no longer walk their path. For Obi-Wan, the Order's inability to acknowledge and honor the complexity of human emotion had cost him his one great love. He could not allow it to claim what remained of his soul. When Obi-Wan departed the temple, he left more than just his title and position behind. He walked away from the boy he had trained for over a decade, Anakin Skywalker, the one prophesied to bring balance to the Force. It was the hardest part of his departure. Obi-Wan had been more than a mentor to Anakin. He had been a brother, a father figure, and a friend. The bond they shared had been forged in the fires of war and tempered by mutual respect and love. But even this connection, as profound as it was, could not keep Obi-Wan tied to a life that no longer resonated with him. Anakin's reaction was one of confusion and betrayal. To the younger Jedi, Obi-Wan had always been a steadfast figure, someone who exemplified the very ideals of the Order. To see him leave was to see those ideals shattered. Yet, beneath his anger, Anakin also felt a pang of understanding. For all his outward defiance, Anakin had always longed for the kind of freedom Obi-Wan was now claiming. The pressures of the Jedi Code, the demands of duty, and the guilt over his secret marriage to Padme weighed heavily on him. Seeing Obi-Wan choose a different path planted a seed in Anakin's mind. A quiet thought that perhaps the life the Jedi offered was not the only way. Months passed. Obi-Wan found himself on the fringes of the galaxy, wandering from one remote planet to another in search of solace. He avoided the core worlds like Coruscant, seeking refuge in places where the shadow of the Republic and the Jedi Order did not loom so large. Though he still carried his lightsaber, he rarely used it. Violence felt like a relic of a life he no longer wished to lead. Instead, he offered aid where he could, healing wounds and mediating disputes with wisdom honed through years of conflict. In his quiet exile, Obi-Wan began to rediscover parts of himself he had long suppressed. A man who could feel deeply, love freely, and live without the constraints of dogma. Meanwhile, back on Coruscant, Anakin was struggling with his own growing dissatisfaction with the Order. Ahsoka Tano's departure had struck him deeply, reopening the wounds left by Obi-Wan's exit. Ahsoka had been his Padawan, his responsibility, and her decision to leave the Jedi highlighted the Order's failures in a way Anakin could no longer ignore. He saw the hypocrisy in their ways, the rigidity that pushed away those who dared to question their methods. Anakin felt torn between his loyalty to the Order and his own growing doubts. He wondered if he, too, might find freedom and peace beyond its walls. When news of Obi-Wan's whereabouts reached Anakin, he could not resist seeking him out. The two met on a desolate moon far from the Republic's gaze, their reunion fraught with emotion. Anakin demanded to know why Obi-Wan had left, why he had abandoned everything they had fought for. But as Obi-Wan spoke of his grief, his disillusionment, and his desire for a life unbound by the constraints of the Jedi Code, Anakin began to see his former master's decision in a new light. Obi-Wan's words resonated with Anakin in ways he hadn't anticipated. For years, Anakin had felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him, the chosen one, the savior of the galaxy. Yet here was Obi-Wan, the man he had looked up to for so long, admitting that even he could not carry the burden of the Jedi's ideals. It was a revelation that shook Anakin to his core. If Obi-Wan could choose a different path, perhaps he could as well. Anakin's choice was not made lightly. His love for Padme and his growing resentment toward the Council were powerful motivators. But it was his connection to Obi-Wan that ultimately tipped the scales. The thought of walking away from the Order alone had always seemed impossible, but with Obi-Wan by his side, it felt like a real possibility. Together, they could carve out a new existence, one unshackled by the constraints of the Jedi Code. Anakin envisioned a life where he could love openly, where he could raise a family with Padme without fear of reprisal, and where he could still fight for justice in his own way. The moment Anakin left the temple, it was as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He joined Obi-Wan in exile, the two of them forging a new path together. Their bond, once strained by Obi-Wan's departure, grew stronger as they navigated this uncharted territory. They became brothers in the truest sense, united not by duty but by choice. Their absence from the Jedi Order sent ripples through the galaxy. The Council struggled to fill the void left by two of its most gifted members, and the loss of Anakin, the Chosen One, was a blow from which it never fully recovered. Yet, for Obi-Wan and Anakin, the decision to leave was not one of abandonment but of liberation. They had chosen to honor the complexity of their own emotions, to live authentically, and to seek a greater understanding of the Force beyond the confines of the Jedi Code. Their journey was not without its challenges, but for the first time in their lives, they were free. And in that freedom, they found a new kind of hope, not just for themselves, but for the galaxy they had once sworn to protect. Obi-Wan and Anakin's departure from the Jedi Order did more than just disrupt the Jedi Council's ranks. It fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. Without the constraints of the Jedi Code or the Council's oversight, the two former Jedi were free to act on their instincts, emotions, and intelligence in ways they never could within the rigid structure of the Order. Together, they became a formidable force of resistance against the growing darkness, one that neither the Sith nor the Republic could predict or control. Obi-Wan, with his unparalleled wisdom and tactical brilliance, found himself unshackled from the Jedi's political entanglements. No longer beholden to the Senate or the Chancellor, he saw the galaxy's conflicts with a clarity that had eluded him during his years as a Jedi General. He began to piece together the patterns of corruption and manipulation that hinted at a sinister design orchestrated from the shadows. Freed from the need to temper his suspicions for fear of overstepping the Council's cautious boundaries, Obi-Wan's sharp mind and deep understanding of galactic politics became a potent weapon in uncovering the truth. Anakin, on the other hand, thrived outside the rigid expectations of the Order. Without the constant pressure to suppress his emotions, he found a new sense of purpose. His deep connection to the Force grew stronger as he embraced the full spectrum of his feelings, not as something to fear, but as a source of strength and clarity. This shift in perspective allowed him to tap into his immense potential, becoming a warrior and pilot of unparalleled skill. Together, Obi-Wan and Anakin formed a dynamic partnership that combined wisdom, power, and unrelenting determination. Their absence from the Order created a power vacuum, one that forced the Council to reevaluate its strategies and priorities. More importantly, it disrupted Darth Sidious's carefully laid plans. Sidious had counted on Anakin's loyalty to the Order and the growing isolation he felt within its confines to manipulate him into becoming his apprentice. Without that isolation, without the constant friction between Anakin's desires and the Jedi's prohibitions, Sidious's influence over him waned. Moreover, Obi-Wan and Anakin's departure made them wild cards in a game where Sidious had planned every move. No longer constrained by the Republic's bureaucracy, they operated outside the systems the Sith controlled. This independence allowed them to strike at the heart of Sidious's schemes in ways the Jedi never could. Where the Jedi were bound by their code and their politics, Obi-Wan and Anakin acted with the freedom and decisiveness that came from answering only to their own moral compass. The duo's first major disruption came when they stumbled upon intelligence linking the Clone Wars' escalating violence to backdoor dealings between certain Republic senators and the Separatists. Operating independently, they pursued leads the Jedi Council had ignored, uncovering secret supply lines, false flag operations, and shadowy intermediaries. As they followed the threads, they began to see the outline of a grander plan, one orchestrated by a hidden puppet master pulling the strings on both sides of the war. Sidious, for all his foresight, had not anticipated this level of interference. The Sith Lord had relied on the Jedi Order's rigidity and its unwillingness to act without consensus to shield his plans from discovery. But Obi-Wan and Anakin, free from those constraints, acted with a swiftness and unpredictability that threatened to unravel his designs. They disrupted key operations, exposed collaborators, and even managed to dismantle several separatist supply chains, forcing Sidious to adapt his strategies on the fly. The turning point came when the two former Jedi uncovered evidence of a mysterious figure influencing both the Republic and the Separatists, a shadowy presence whose reach extended far beyond what they had imagined. This revelation solidified their resolve. They realized that the war was not simply a conflict between two opposing factions, but a manufactured crisis designed to consolidate power in the hands of a single entity. With this knowledge, Obi-Wan and Anakin made it their mission to uncover and confront this hidden threat, no matter the cost. Their actions sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Sidious's carefully constructed facade began to crack as Obi-Wan and Anakin exposed more and more of his web of deception. The Republic and the Jedi Order, though still unaware of Sidious's true identity, began to question the narratives they had been fed. The cracks in the Sith Lord's plans widened, forcing him to accelerate his timetable and take greater risks to maintain control. In one critical moment, Obi-Wan and Anakin intercepted a separatist envoy carrying encrypted messages intended for Count Dooku. With Anakin's technical expertise and Obi-Wan's keen analytical mind, they decoded the messages, revealing a trail that led directly to Sidious's inner circle. Though they did not yet know the true identity of the Sith Lord, they now had the means to narrow their search and disrupt his operations even further. Sidious, for all his power and cunning, found himself facing a growing resistance he had not accounted for. Obi-Wan and Anakin's unique partnership and their freedom from institutional constraints made them a force unlike any other. They were not bound by politics, ideology, or fear. They acted with a singular focus on uncovering the truth and protecting the galaxy from the darkness they sensed looming on the horizon. As their efforts gained momentum, they began to inspire others to join their cause. Disillusioned Jedi, Republic officers, and even civilians flocked to their side, creating a grassroots movement that operated outside the bounds of the Republic and the Jedi Order. This network of allies provided crucial intelligence and resources, enabling Obi-Wan and Anakin to strike deeper into the heart of the Sith's operations. With each victory, the Sith's plans unraveled further. The Clone Wars, once a tool of manipulation and chaos, began to lose its momentum as Obi-Wan and Anakin dismantled the mechanisms that fueled it. Sidious's grand scheme to use the war as a means to seize ultimate power faltered, forcing him to play his hand earlier than he had intended. And in that haste, he made mistakes. Mistakes that Obi-Wan and Anakin exploited with devastating precision. By the time the final confrontation came, Obi-Wan and Anakin were no longer mere fugitives or outcasts. They had become symbols of hope and resistance, a beacon of light in a galaxy shrouded in darkness. When they finally stood face to face with Sidious, it was not as Jedi bound by an outdated code, but as warriors who had embraced the full complexity of their humanity and their connection to the Force. Their combined strength, wisdom, and resolve proved too much for Sidious. His vision of an eternal Sith Empire crumbled, undone by the very individuals he had sought to manipulate and control. In the end, it was not the Jedi Order or the Republic that defeated the Sith. It was two men who had dared to walk away from the institutions that had defined their lives, and in doing so, found the strength to forge a new path for the galaxy.